Two pairs of frantic footsteps pounded through the darkness. Branches snapped. A terrified scream echoed through the forest. Then, Wanjiku and Amani burst through the trees, running for their lives. Behind them, angry villagers carrying flaming torches crashed through the forest. "There they are! Don't let them escape!" The girls ran faster. Amani suddenly stumbled over a tree root and crashed to the ground. Without hesitation, Wanjiku pulled her back to her feet. Just ahead, an old wooden bridge stretched across a roaring river. Hope filled Wanjiku's eyes. "We're almost there!" They raced onto the bridge. Halfway across, Amani stopped. Wanjiku turned in disbelief. "Amani, why are you stopping?" Amani looked toward the approaching villagers, then back at Wanjiku. Tears filled her eyes. "Go. Not without you. We'll cross together." Amani slowly shook her head. "No, this is my home. I can't run from my roots." The villagers were getting closer. Their voices echoed through the night. "They're on the bridge! There they are!" Wanjiku's voice broke. "Please, don't leave me." Amani reached into the small pouch at her waist and pulled out a worn wooden pendant. She pressed it into Wanjiku's trembling hand. "Keep this. My mother always said, as long as this pendant stays with someone whose heart is pure, hope never dies." Wanjiku stared at the pendant in confusion. "What are you talking about? Come with me." Amani gently closed Wanjiku's fingers around it. "One day, you'll understand." She kissed Wanjiku's forehead, then gave her one firm push. "Run! Please, save yourself!" Tears streaming down her face, Wanjiku finally turned and ran across the bridge. Moments later, the villagers surrounded her. Their leader stepped forward with a cold smile. A wise choice. The morning sun rose gently over the green hills of Kianyaga village, bringing another beautiful day to the peaceful community. Among everyone who lived there, one name was on everyone's lips: Wanjiku. She was the most beautiful young woman in the village, but her beauty was not what made people love her. It was her heart. No hungry child ever left her empty-handed. No elderly neighbor ever carried a heavy load alone when Wanjiku was nearby. To the people of Kianyaga, she was a blessing. But while the villagers admired Wanjiku's kindness, her mother admired something else: her beauty. Day after day, Nyambura filled her daughter's ears with the same words. As she braided Wanjiku's hair, she would say, "My daughter, a flower as beautiful as you was never meant to grow in poor soil." Whenever they returned from the market, she would whisper, "Don't spend your youth building a poor man's future." Whenever tired women walked home from the farms with heavy firewood on their heads, Nyambura would quietly ask, "Is that the life you want for yourself?" At first, Wanjiku only smiled. She believed every honest life deserved respect. But as the weeks turned into months, those words slowly found a place in her heart. Before long, she no longer dreamed of a good husband. She dreamed of a rich one. Word of Wanjiku's beauty spread far beyond Kianyaga. Young men came from neighboring villages hoping to win her heart. Some were farmers, some were blacksmiths, others were cattle traders. They all came with honorable intentions, but they all left with the same answer: no. One after another, Wanjiku turned them away. Soon, the villagers began to whisper, "The old Wanjiku would never have behaved this way. What happened to that humble girl?" Even her own father watched the change with growing concern. Then, one afternoon, a young man named Kamau arrived. Unlike the others, Kamau was no stranger. He had grown up in Kianyaga. Everyone knew him. He was hardworking, respectful, honest. Though he wasn't wealthy, he was the kind of man every parent hoped their daughter would marry. When Wanjiku saw Kamau standing before her family, for a brief moment, the old Wanjiku returned. She smiled. Kamau smiled back. But before she could speak, her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Your beauty is your greatest blessing. Don't trade it for hardship. Wanjiku's smile slowly disappeared. She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, Kamau. I cannot marry you. Kamau stood silently for a moment. Then he nodded respectfully. I pray you find the happiness you are looking for. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Her father watched him leave with a heavy heart.
A heavy silence filled the family home after Kamau and his family left. Wanjiku stood quietly, avoiding her father's eyes. Nyambura folded her arms, clearly unmoved. After a long moment, Wanjiku's father let out a deep sigh. My daughter, I have lived longer than you. I have seen rich men become beggars and poor men become kings. He looked directly into her eyes. But one thing has never changed. A good name is worth more than a bag of gold. He paused before continuing. Our elders used to say, a shiny fruit can still be rotten inside. Never choose a husband because of what he owns. Choose him because of who he is. If a man's heart is good, God can bless the work of his hands. But if his heart is evil, even all the wealth in the world cannot bring peace into your home. Wanjiku lowered her head. For a brief moment, his words touched her heart. But before she could speak, Nyambura stepped forward. She laughed softly. My husband, the world you grew up in is gone. She turned to Wanjiku. My daughter, respect your father's wisdom, but remember this. Love alone cannot fill an empty stomach. Character cannot buy a home, and kindness cannot clothe your children. She gently held Wanjiku's face. You deserve a life that every woman dreams of, a life where you never have to struggle. Wanjiku looked from her father to her mother. Then, without saying a word, she quietly walked into the house. Her father watched her leave. His heart grew heavy. Something told him he was slowly losing the daughter he once knew. The following week, the peaceful afternoon in Kianyaga village was suddenly interrupted by the sound of approaching engines. At first, the villagers paid no attention, but as the sound grew louder, a cloud of dust rose from the village road. Children stopped playing. Farmers straightened their backs. Women stepped out of their homes, shielding their eyes from the sun. Within moments, a convoy of gleaming black SUVs slowly rolled into the village. No one had ever seen so many luxury vehicles in Kianyaga. The convoy came to a smooth stop in the village square. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then, the rear door of the lead SUV opened. A tall, handsome young man stepped out. He was dressed in an elegant designer suit, complemented by a richly patterned Kikuyu ceremonial shawl draped over his shoulders. His movements were calm, his expression unreadable. He didn't look around in amazement. Instead, he looked at the villagers as though he had finally arrived where he was meant to be.
Whispers spread through the crowd. Who is he? Could he be a politician? No. Look at those vehicles. He must be a billionaire. The village chief stepped forward to welcome the unexpected visitor. The young man smiled politely and extended his hand. My name is Mwangi. I've traveled a long way to come here. The chief nodded warmly. You are welcome to Kianyaga. What brings you to our village? Baraka glanced briefly at the gathering crowd before answering. I came looking for a someone. The murmuring stopped. I've heard there is a young woman in this village whose beauty is matched only by her kindness. I've come to ask for Wanjiku's hand in marriage." The entire village fell silent. Across the crowd, Nyambura's eyes widened. The dream she had spent months planting in her daughter's heart had just arrived at her doorstep. The moment the gathering ended, Nyambura hurried home almost faster than she could walk. She burst through the front door. "Wanjiku, you won't believe what has happened." Wanjiku looked up from grinding maize. "What is it, mother?" Nyambura could barely contain her excitement. "A wealthy young man has arrived. He says he has traveled across many villages looking for a wife, and out of every woman, he chose you." Wanjiku froze. "Me?" Nyambura nodded eagerly. "He owns more wealth than anyone in this village has ever seen. I told you God did not create you for an ordinary life." For the first time, instead of questioning her mother's excitement, Wanjiku smiled. That evening, the family sat together in silence. Only the sound of crickets filled the night. Unlike Nyambura, Wanjiku's father couldn't shake the strange feeling growing inside him. Something about Baraka troubled him, not because he was rich, but because he had appeared out of nowhere. He looked at Wanjiku. "My daughter, has anyone told you where this man comes from?" Wanjiku shook her head. "No, father." "Does anyone know his family?" Again, she shook her head. The old man sighed deeply. "A river that appears overnight should never be crossed in a hurry." Nyambura rolled her eyes. "There you go again, always looking for danger where there is none." But Wanjiku's father remained quiet. His instincts had warned him before. This time, the feeling was even stronger. Within days, preparations for the wedding began. The entire village buzzed with excitement. People had never seen such generosity. Baraka spared no expense. Goats and cattle were slaughtered. Traditional dancers filled the village square with music and celebration. Guests arrived from neighboring villages. Many whispered that Wanjiku had become the luckiest woman alive. Nyambura could hardly contain her joy. She walked through the crowd with her head held high. Every smile, every congratulation made her feel as though she had achieved her life's greatest dream. Only one person remained uneasy: Wanjiku's father. Though he smiled for his daughter, his heart refused to celebrate. As the ceremony ended, it was time for Wanjiku to leave with her husband. She embraced her mother. Nyambura whispered proudly, "I told you, you are born for greatness." Then Wanjiku turned to her father. The old man held her hands tightly. "My daughter, if you ever find yourself choosing between wealth and peace, choose peace." He paused. "And remember, not every smile hides a kind heart." Wanjiku smiled gently. "Father, you worry too much." He tried to smile back, but something inside him broke. As Wanjiku climbed into the car beside Baraka, he quietly whispered to himself, "May God protect you." The journey took several hours. The convoy left the busy highway behind and followed a quiet road that wound through rolling green hills, tea plantations, and peaceful villages. As evening approached, they turned onto a private road lined with towering mugumo trees. A few moments later, two massive black iron gates came into view. Intricate Kikuyu patterns were engraved into the metal, while the Mwangi family crest gleamed proudly at the center. The gates slid open automatically. One by one, the SUVs drove into the estate. Wanjiku gazed through the window in amazement. The driveway stretched ahead, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, colorful flowers, elegant fountains, and towering palm trees. It wasn't just a mansion. It looked more like a private luxury resort. Its modern architecture blended beautifully with traditional Kikuyu craftsmanship, creating a home that was both breathtaking and timeless. The convoy came to a gentle stop. Before Baraka could open his door, several household staff were already waiting outside.
They stood in neat rows, dressed in elegant uniforms. As Baraka and Wanjiku stepped out, every servant bowed respectfully. "Welcome home, sir. Welcome home, madam." Their voices were perfectly synchronized. Yet something felt wrong. Not a single smile appeared on their faces. Their expressions were cold, almost lifeless. The cheerful excitement Wanjiku had expected from a household welcoming a new bride was nowhere to be found. She glanced at Baraka. He smiled reassuringly, but the uneasy feeling in her chest refused to disappear. As Wanjiku settled into her new room, her eyes drifted toward a small carved wooden box resting on top of her belongings. It was the last gift her late grandmother had given her. She smiled softly and reached for it. But just as she lifted it, it slipped from her hands. Before it could hit the polished wooden floor, a young servant girl caught it. She carefully dusted it off before holding it out with both hands. Unlike everyone else in the mansion, her smile felt genuine. "My name is Amani," she said softly. "I've been assigned as your personal maid. I'll be taking care of you." For the first time since arriving, Wanjiku smiled. "Thank you." Neither of them knew that this simple meeting would change both of their lives forever. That evening, as the servants prepared the evening meal, Wanjiku wandered through the mansion. The house was beautiful, yet strangely empty. She noticed something unusual. Every servant avoided looking directly at her. Whenever she smiled, they quickly lowered their heads. Whenever she asked a question, they answered in the shortest words possible. It was as though they were afraid of saying too much. Late that night, Wanjiku wakes to the sound of soft knocking on her bedroom door. 3 gentle knocks. She opens it. Standing outside is Amani. Her face is pale. Her hands are trembling. She keeps looking over her shoulder to make sure no one has followed her. Before Wanjiku can speak, Amani grabs her wrist. Her voice is barely above a whisper. "I have you to leave." Wanjiku stares in confusion. "Leave? Why?" Amani's eyes fill with tears. She shakes her head. "There is no time to explain. If you want to live, you must run before the 7th day." Wanjiku's heart skips a beat. "What are you talking about?" Amani opens her mouth to answer, but suddenly a door creaks somewhere down the hallway, followed by footsteps. Amani freezes. Fear floods her face. She quickly steps back into the darkness. Before disappearing, she whispers, "Trust no one." She vanishes into the shadows. Wanjiku stands frozen at her doorway, confused, terrified. One question echoes through her mind. What happens on the 7th day?